A wonderful morning. The sea spread out like a big blue spot. Particles of stormy foam sometimes rolled in, then again moved away from the shore. The green leaves of the trees after the night rain still sparkled with their droplets in the sun as if diamonds were located on them. It was a beautiful, incredible, wonderful island, in the center of which Duke Blackwell's castle was located. There was still a prayer room on the island where Angie came every morning. Today, on one of those days, she came to pray again. The sound of the bells echoed far away and interrupted the whispers of her prayer. Only quiet passages were heard, in which she was thankful that she could live on this island. When the battle of bells died down, the knocking of heels was heard. This knocking echoed in every corner of the huge corridor, getting closer and closer. When it became quite loud, Angie heard her mother's voice calling her to finish the prayer in a hurry. A young lady, full of joy, left the chapel. She had an incredible event today. For the first time in her life, she was invited to visit the Duke. The island Angie lived on, Cullinan, was incredibly sunny and green. From all sides, it was washed by an endless blue sea. It was covered with dense beech forests that rustled their crowns, like lungs sometimes opening to a full chest, then squeezing into a small ball. The island has a centuries-old history, but it was not always so safe. In the tumultuous years burdened by the war on the mainland, people were on the verge of extinction. The incredible madness of some tried to conquer the humanity of others. People of different races and nationalities have found salvation from boulevards on a cozy island, and they all live in harmony, helping each other. Every morning they visit the prayer chapel and pray for the salvation of their souls, believing in Saint Calum, who gives them the right path and one goal for all. Angie and her parents settled on the island when she was still a baby, and she felt safe here. Everything around brought her pleasure, and she was not sad at all. Every morning, as soon as the sun shone, she opened her incredibly large, green, inquisitive eyes and ran out into the yard. So this morning started the same way. But after prayer, she goes to the Duke's castle at his personal invitation. My heart almost jumped out of my chest with excitement. And with each clatter of the hooves of the horses harnessed to her carriage, her heart beat harder and harder. Thousands of thoughts raced through Angie's head, replacing each other. Then about the future meeting, then about the Duke's carriage in which she was riding, and many others. She still did not believe that she had the honor of meeting the heir of Duke Blackwell, the founder of this island, Lord Kylek. Kai grew up as a very sickly child, so he grew up withdrawn and unfriendly, never left the walls of the castle. Mother warned Ensta that maybe Kai will be unfriendly, but that's because of his illness and the fact that he has no friends. Since Angie did not know what loneliness was, it was difficult for her to understand how the young lord felt, but she promised to be friendly. The quiet clatter of hooves, the slight rocking of the carriage stopped, and Angie carefully opened the door without waiting for her to be offered to go out. She jumped out herself. An incredibly huge castle with forged elements of the door rose in front of the tiny, fragile girl. Embarrassed, she shifted from foot to foot. She was very worried, barely breathing while waiting to meet the lord. And then the door opened, and the figure of the chief manager of the castle appeared on the threshold. Her look was quite unfriendly, and Angie felt completely embarrassed. Louise Dunst was stern in appearance, and her voice sounded stern. She invited Angie to come in, but Angie stood there for a few seconds. When the little lady regained her composure and raised her head, she saw the incredible decoration of the castle and its halls. She caught her breath. The luxurious rooms had such an effect on Angie that she froze again. Exploring the halls, she came across a wall of portraits, but one frame was empty. While her thoughts circled around the empty frame, probably prepared for the portrait of Lord Kylek, the steward was already standing at the threshold of another hall. Miss Louise Dunst interrupted the young lady's thoughts about what she thought Kylek looked like. She warned Angie about the rules of visiting the Lord, and emphasized that she would not be able to see him, only hear his voice. Angie listened to all the rules and meekly replied that she would abide by all of the above. The door opened before her. With heavy creaking, they slowly turned aside and gave her passage. The room was unusually large and gloomy. When Angie crossed the threshold, she heard the echo of a voice coming from behind the curtain. Kai did not want to see anyone and was not in the mood to get acquainted. The fact that the Lord intends to remain completely alone and does not want to see anyone upset Angie quite a bit, and she, confused, did not know what to do. No one knew for sure the reason why Kai did not leave the castle, but people whispered that his illness required harsh therapy. Since the disease was very long-lasting, The therapy disfigured his face and body, and therefore he was forced to spend time in solitude. However, no one knew the real reason. These are only guesses of people who care about the lives of others. And these rumors were so widespread among the inhabitants of the island that they were afraid to even look at the Lord, as if he were an incredible fear. It seemed to Angie that it was for this reason that the Lord did not want to meet her. She was nervous about the meeting, but not because of Kylek's appearance. While preparing the surprise, she imagined how and what she would say, thought whether he would like her and that she would be refused a visit at all. She did not expect. Kylek yelled at the manager that she again entered his room without consent, and also brought a stranger, and she, apologizing, hastened to leave. After Miss Louisa, he menacingly threw that he would forgive her indiscretion today and threatened that it would never happen again. The manager lowered her head, and it seemed to Angie that she was incredibly upset by this incident, and now as if she was no longer so strict. In fact, Miss Louise lived in the castle for a long time and saved the Lord as a child as her own son. She loved and cared for him very much. She did everything for his good. And now passing by Angie, putting her hand on her shoulder, she whispered to Angie to stay for what she came here for. The young lady thought she had not been in such situations before and did not understand how to do the right thing. It seemed that, on the one hand, he did not want to see her and directly said so. On the other hand, it was her choice to thank this glorious family from everyone. For Angie, this choice took an eternity, although it was only a few seconds before she mentally asked her mother for help in making the right decision. And then she heard a voice that called her. I thought what seemed like it, but the voice sounded quite confidently, haughtily, and in a commanding tone. The Lord offered to approach, but he remained only a shadow and did not even try to open the curtain. Embarrassed, Angie took a few unsteady steps toward the curtain, and then looking around, a few more confident ones. Now she couldn't wait to get closer to the Lord and maybe even see him. But Kai offered to sit away, near the window, and she agreed. Sitting down in the carved chair, Angie shyly clutched her purse and didn't know where to start the conversation. A voice broke the silence first. He asked what her name was. And Angie, as if she had been waiting for this question for a long time, instantly answered that she was from the Rysdale family. Although the tension was still binding her body, she began to chatter out of excitement that she was grateful for the honor of becoming his companion. She paused for a second and continued that she would like to share with the Lord a story she made up, and perhaps she had a dream. Lord Kai was very surprised. All the previous female companions were not interesting at all and could not support the conversation, no matter what its topic was. Angie continued to say something. Kylek did not listen to the essence of the story. He plunged into his thoughts and began to closely examine his new acquaintance. I traced the silhouette of this lady along the curtain, tried to make out her long wavy hair, fragile figure dressed in a thin dress. Having received an invitation from the Blackwell family to spend some time with the Lord, so that he could at least talk to someone, Angie thought for a long time about what to interest him. In addition to morning prayers, reading books is included in her daily to-do list. Different stories are so absorbing in their events that she read them together. She was also engaged in sewing and embroidering lace, but that was more for necessity than for pleasure. Besides, there is very little chance that the Lord would be interested in lace. Moreover, his family is so wealthy that it will be impossible to interest anyone in the house in lace. Even the maid has seen more refined and attractive ones than hers. Angie went through the options for a long time, and everything she came up with could not compare to the book stories. Angie didn't have many books, and she had read them all many times, and she hadn't had a chance to read anything new lately, but the Lord must have read more. And then the thought crept into her that she could create her own story, amazing and unlike any other, new and perhaps about Lord Kylek himself. She began to dream and invent like a real writer, looking out the window at endless landscapes, and she looked through them into a fictional world. Probably other worlds and the mainland, to which all islanders were closed, could be present in this story. But history was written here and now. She imagined everything she read about, and the characters began to intertwine from different books into one. The thought crept into her that Kai could also read the books she read, and then they could discuss all the events of those stories. Dreams, dreams. And that's it. She is sitting here, in a huge castle. Because of how big the rooms here are, it seems that there is no one else, even. There is an echo from the pounding of the heart. Angie told Kylek about the fictional stories and asked if he wanted to share his impression. Maybe he would like to create his own. And if you don't like the story, You can rewrite it at any time or it will stop telling them if you don't like it at all. For Lord Kylek, such a proposal was completely new. No one had proposed anything like this before, but he was still wary. Curiosity won and he offered Angie to try, and immediately threatened to throw her out if the stories were not interesting. Angie was beaming. It was still a little scary, but she forced herself to focus because when she told her fictional stories to others, they liked it. And she began about the ancient Greek goddess Sibyl who came from a very ancient family of gods. The story flowed from her lips like nectar. Her voice spilled through the room and seeped into every crevice. It seemed that even the butterfly sitting on the curtain was listening. While she spoke, fear did not leave her thoughts and thirst stuck in her throat. But she did not stop for a moment and continued weaving new events. Only the look from behind the curtain threw her a little, but she immediately controlled herself and continued. And Kai silently listened to the story to the end, without interrupting. When Angie finished, there was silence, not a single sound, not even the rustling of leaves outside the window, as if they were somewhere in the middle of the universe. She didn't know how to react to this silence, quietly got up and took several barely audible steps towards the forged door. And then there was a rustling behind the curtain, and Lord Kylek invited her to come again on the same day and time. Angie meekly agreed and headed for the exit. When she took hold of the heavy handle to open the door, she heard her name and wishes for a good trip. It is hard to imagine what feelings were overwhelming the young lady now. She understood that Lord Kylek liked the story, and that she would be able to tell niches in the future. After leaving the castle, she already had thousands of thoughts about the future story, which she will offer to listen to and perhaps this time discuss. And the Lord imperceptibly approached the window and watched as a fragile figure with hair the color of the sun's rays receded. The night was dark, as if thick, and moving in such darkness was helped only by the moon, which sometimes emerged from behind densely packed clouds, then hid behind them again. When the clouds passed, he tried to cover the entire water surface that spread around the island and illuminate individual stars. There was a rustling sound from the shore. It seemed that something heavy was crawling along the sand and was making a deep furrow with its thick iron belly, leaving an inevitable trail. If you look closely, you can see that someone is pushing a heavy iron boat. There are still a few meters left, and he surprisingly stubbornly tries to push her. The moon came out again to illuminate the path, and then a splash was heard. Finally, the boat was where it belonged, in the water. Waves quickly washed her sides. Finally! And Elliot's heavy breathing began to return to normal. He wiped the sweat from his forehead that had come out when he pushed his boat hard, alone. Elliot was a very interested person. He was interested in absolutely everything that could be studied. Trees, animals, the bottom of the ocean. Everything that the eye touches. His father and mother restrained his desire for the unknown, but he grew up and longed to see the world. The thought of living locked up on an island was unbearable for him. They continued to explain to him that they owed the lives of the Blackwell family, and that the mainland was dangerous and unsustainable after the war. But he did not listen. He was unbearably bored with everything that surrounded him, everything that was painfully familiar. He picked up an oar, and with each stroke seemed to remove a layer of memory about the island. The world around. A boundless, unexplored world that they had not seen for hundreds of years since the Duke's ancestors rescued the survivors and gave them shelter. He took his supplies of water and food and set out for the unknown, endless world that awaited him, spreading across the horizon and far beyond the horizon. The incredible silence was broken only by the quiet lapping of the waves. The boat seemed to float by itself, bathing in the gentle bottoms of the water pool. Elliot got far enough from the shore, looking around. He saw an unusual sight. No one had dared to swim off the island yet, but he succeeded. He was beckoned further into the unknown. He had already reached the windmills that surrounded the entire island. They were incredibly large. When Elliot got even closer, it turned out that he had not seen any structures larger than these. He seemed like a small ant against the background of a windmill. It was the boundary between Cullinan Island and the outside world. This is where the unknown universe began. Finally, he will be able to discover something new for himself. But as soon as he breathed a sigh of relief that he managed to leave the island, the moon that illuminated his path hid behind thick, dark clouds. In complete darkness, incomprehensible things began to happen. The boat was rocked by an unknown force. A strong wind blew from the windmills. The frightened Elliot froze. Fear and panic gripped the boy. In the darkness, something hit him on the face, another blow. Something warm, sticky, and with a taste of metal streamed down his face. Blood. Giant windmills guarded the peace of the island, and there is no way past them. The wreckage of the boat and blood, which spread in a thick stain on the light surface, quickly reached the shore and further underground channels into the bowels of the castle. Her metallic smell spread through the dungeon in which, behind the forged bars, was a mysterious prisoner. Feeling this smell, he began to mumble. At first quietly, then louder, and then he shouted to give him blood. Every breath of wind that blew away the smell of blood sucked up by the waters excited him. The morning started as usual. The bright, warm sun dispersed the night clouds. It peered its rays into the windows of every building on the island. Angie got up with the first shine of the sun and was impatiently waiting to meet her friends. They usually sat together for lace on this day. Someone was engaged in embroidery. Someone skillfully mastered needlepoint or a needle. But the most important thing is that they could talk on any topic, away from everyone. They gathered near the open sky, and someone remarked that Angie's lace was incredibly beautiful. Everyone began to look and wonder what a masterful work. Angie was flattered. She thanked her friends for the praise because she really loved her job and was really good at it. She unfolded the flowers so that her friends could look around, and she told them that she uses these marigolds as a signature for her work. She said that she sees marigolds in her dreams, and every time she dreams of a glade, her soul feels warm. These are her favorite flowers, and she added that she dreams of sewing clothes that will be embroidered with these flowers. Angie fell silent and plunged into the world of dreams, where she imagined a dress in marigold flowers. The friends brought Angie back from her dreams with a cheerful uproar. They chirped at each other that she would definitely succeed and become the most famous fashion designer on the island. Letitia Durbin was the only daughter of the manager of the Blackwells. Picked up compliments for Angie and asked to be her personal dressmaker. Everyone laughed. Letitia then, hugging Angie, said that they just had to sign the contract. All friends were having fun. Suddenly, a noise came from afar, and the inhabitants of the island began to whisper about night terrors. Word of mouth passed on about the death of the animals. This whisper reached her friends as well. They stopped having fun and asked each other in fright who could do such a thing. It was crazy news for everyone. They did not have time to recover with one piece of news when a cry was heard. A request for help. One of the residents frantically called everyone to follow him. When he had compared everyone, he breathlessly announced that he had found Elliot on the shore. And he is dead. They couldn't believe it because just yesterday he was telling them about unexplored worlds, about travels and new discoveries. And here, the older inhabitants of the island strictly ordered that the girlfriends return to their homes, close the doors, and not step out of the buildings. As they walked from house to house, someone said that Elliot was going to run off the island yesterday, and everyone immediately understood that there is no way out from here. It's nonsense. Adults who went ashore found Elliot's mutilated body washed ashore by the waves. His bloodied body was spread out prostrate. The grief and pain of the loss of a son cannot be expressed in words. The cry that spread along the shore could only be compared to the abdominal groan of an ancient rock. Everyone stood with their heads down. Their peace was disturbed. Their peaceful life for centuries after the war on the mainland was disturbed by something unknown and terrible. Another reason to remind all residents that they cannot leave this island. There were rumors that Elliot was attacked by sharks while trying to leave the island. His parents were inconsolable. Every second from the first breath he pleased them. The first noise, the first steps, the first mom, and now silence. Angie had never seen so much pain, pity, and wailing, never seen the bottomless hopelessness in anyone's eyes, and it continued like this for several days. And this morning surprised her quite a bit. She met Elliot's mother in such a good mood, as if nothing had happened. This alarmed her. Mrs. Hawkins talked about the beautiful weather and asked Angie where she was going. She conducted the conversation as if there had been no past events. Angie tried to understand. Is she better? She acted as if she had forgotten everything, as if those terrible events were simply erased from memory. Today was exactly the day Angie visited Lord Kylak. She was no longer worried about their meetings. As usual, she sat down at the table by the window, away from the curtain behind which the Lord was, and told about the meeting in the morning and the strange behavior of Mrs. Hawkins. She shared her impressions about such a quick change in her mood. Angie asked the Lord what he thought about it. Kylak saw that she was confused by this topic, and to calm her down a little, he offered to drink tea and change the topic to Sybil, who wanted immortality. The story of a priestess who was given 1,000 years by Apollo. Here Angie perked up. It turns out that Kai listened carefully to her last time, and the Lord wondered if there was such an opportunity. How would Angie react to such a gift? Would she like to be immortal? Such a question made her think. She did not answer anything to the Lord, only quietly looked through the curtain that separated them. Kai suggested imagining that Apollo appeared to her with an offer of eternal life and youth, and wondered what her answer would be. Angie replied that she would probably turn down such an offer, and she explained that at first, of course, it would be attractive, and later she added that life is beautiful if it is finite. Even the most beautiful flower blooms and loses its petals. This is life. Lord did not believe what he heard and asked whether immortality really means nothing to her. Angie said he got her right. Kylek was stunned by such an answer. He did not expect that there was even one person left on the island who could think like that. But visiting hours were over, and Miss Louise opened the door to show Angie out. Kylek paced the room back and forth as if measuring it over and over again. Then Louise came back and asked if the new medicine was suitable for him, nodded at Angie. But he yelled at the stewardess not to call the young lady that way, and again began to measure the room, pondering over her words. All evening he wondered why Angie was not like the others, why she thought differently. After these thoughts, night came. Kylek went down to the dungeon, to his father. He asked the Duke what the new medicines meant. What would happen to those who took these medicines? He asked 1,000 questions. Hergog Blackwell, who was locked in the dungeon, told his son that when his blood chooses a medicine for itself, there is no turning back. Kylek said under his breath that he understood why he killed his mother because she was the medicine. And he thought, many centuries ago it all started with a curse. I curse that people would never dare to wish for immortality. They will pay for this desire in blood. In order to live, they will take medicine, the blood of their chosen ones, until they die. That's why Miss Louise called Angie medicine. But Lord Kylek didn't like it and wanted to break the cycle, break the spell. Today was another day of lace meetings. The girls discussed the latest news, in particular that the Duke had many offspring. Letitia said that Duchess Eugenia gave many children to the Duke, but all of them, except for Kylek, died, and after them the Duchess. And then she added that the medicine for the Duke disfigures his face and makes him cruel, so he abuses the servants. Another added that he is turning into a monster, and that this is not the first time people on the island have talked about it. The girls were horrified by such news. No one knew that Angie was visiting the young lord. Of course, she did not believe a word and came to his defense. She eagerly told her friends that it was all fiction, that he is really rude, but he is not a monster, that he is sensitive and perceptive. But catching the surprised looks of her friends and remembering that their meetings are secret, she changed the conversation, saying that it is so bad to talk about the one who sheltered them. The girls agreed that they shouldn't have said that, because they really don't know the young lord but only hearsay about him. Here Angie thought that she was not interested in what Kai looked like. She only knew that he was tall and his voice was low, and that he was considerate of others. Time passed and she waited again to meet the lord. She was informed that he was busy with business and might not be able to receive her, and she waited meekly. She was drowsy with anticipation, and she decided to walk around the room. Looking out the window, she was surprised by a wonderful view. Then she began to think that it would be nice to walk through those landscapes with the Lord. It is a pity that he does not leave the walls of the castle. In those thoughts and dreams, the Queen of Dreams still took hold of Angie's thoughts and she fell asleep sweetly, sitting on the floor near the window. This is exactly how Kai found her. He took the blanket and covered her, wrapping it around her fragile shoulders. She seemed to be muttering something and, pulling up the blanket, sat down more comfortably. The manager, Jerome Hamilton, came to the Lord and informed about the recent conversation of the girls. Rumors that he is a monster are spreading around the island faster and faster. Kai thought that Angie must think he's a monster, but Jerome assured him that she wasn't, that she was the only one who denied all the rumors. Hamilton asked whether to put an end to the gossip, to which the Lord suggested simply being interested in the course of events. Kylek thought again that she was different from everyone else, even thought differently, and her values were not like everyone else's. Is it possible to be different from everyone else? He began to whisper to the sleeping Ange that he wanted her to feel sorry for him. After all, he was so lacking in simple warmth and tenderness, ever since his mother passed away. Ange woke up from a warm breath on her face, not immediately realizing where she was. Kai asked not to open his eyes, and she obediently closed them. Kai said he still had a lot to do and he wouldn't be able to give her time. And she smelled the aroma of roses. He smelled of roses. And he also whispered to her that he liked her stories and invited her to visit him much more often. Angie was overwhelmed with emotion. Story after story was already running through her head, which she would share with Kai, then discuss them. Still not opening her eyes, she heard that the Lord would be looking forward to their meeting. On the north shore of the island is an estate overseen by Angie's parents. She helps in the household and sometimes enjoys the coolness. Today, while looking around the house, she came across rose bushes. It's as if they only recently released leaves, but they are already blooming. What a beauty and what an incredibly delicate aroma. At this time, all residents prepare petals for their favorite rose tea. This scent evoked recent memories. This is how Kai smelled, a subtle rose scent. And he remembered whether it was a dream or a dream. He asked to have mercy on him. And she plunged into memories' thoughts about Kai. She wanted to understand what he was like. She remembered that he was sometimes strict, sometimes gentle, and also generous, warm and gentle. Sometimes he seemed to withdraw, sometimes let him approach. Angie increasingly told him different stories with fictional endings. Sometimes the Lord laughed at how she managed to turn the most tragic story into a comedy, with her fictional ending. And she was glad that she could cheer him up. Angie remembered that from time to time the Lord was not so strict, and she thought at that time that she would like to see the person behind the curtain. Here her thoughts' memories were interrupted by some strange sounds. She looked fearfully into the distance because there were rumors that animals were torn to pieces here. The mother's voice was heard. She called Angie to help with the household chores and was going to the castle. Lord Kai will be waiting for her today. As always, the coachman dropped her off near the stairs. She has been walking to the castle for a long time along this very path. The stairs passed the garden. In his hands was a bouquet of roses for Kai. She walked up the stairs and thought how quickly time flies. It's almost autumn, and soon winter will follow. Louise opened the door as usual. They were happy to see each other. And then Angie realized that she is already almost 18. How fast time flies. 3 years have passed. Spring changed to summer, summer to autumn, and winter came again. This whirlwind carried the development of Angie and Kai's relationship. It was already customary for them to meet in his rooms. Oh, how sometimes it was painful to open that curtain. But she lacked the courage to look at him as if he were God. Kai asked what she would like for her birthday. After all, this is a special day, her coming of age. He had given her so many things in recent years that she did not know what to answer. Although she had a desire and only wanted to say what she wanted. She heard a terrible cough. Frightened, she jumped up and ran to the curtain. Her heart was jumping out of her chest, but he ordered not to come near. Then Angie made such a fuss that all the court people came together. She begged for help so much that even the gardener heard and rushed over. Louise barely managed to pull Angie away from the curtain and ask her to leave the castle. She promised that she would take care of the Lord's health so that she would not worry. When the coachman was driving her home, she was thinking about the wish she had to make. If she could, she would make her accept the veil, and then she would be able to hug him. The morning prayer was usual. Only Angie did not hear the words of the pastor. She prayed for Kai. His unbearable pain could not be compared to anything. She remembered that it was like this before, but now it is much worse. I prayed that he would feel better, that he would be able to recover, to overcome a terrible disease. Day of lace. Angie was returning late and met strange figures whispering to each other, but she reassured herself that she had passed and went home. Parents were waiting. When she crossed the threshold, her mother gave her a card saying that Kai was not feeling well, but as soon as he got better, her wish was waiting. Kailek, meanwhile, was getting worse and had long needed a blood transfusion, which he refused to accept once Miss Louise reminded him. Kailek's response was so sharp that Louise jumped. He said he would never hurt Angie. After reading the letter, Ange decided to write too and tell him how important his letter was and that she was looking forward to meeting him. And she added that she doesn't want anything as a gift, but she has a desire that she wants to see his face. If only she knew how he barely restrained himself from approaching her. I remembered those meetings, her relaxed, sincere eyes, her open soul, and her selflessness. He remembered her words about the value of the finite life, and was simply mesmerized by her. If only he could tell her that. If only she knew. How he forces himself not to touch her. He kept his desires a secret. He was afraid that if he opened up, he would lose her. After all, if he completely trusts her, she won't want to be around him. Such a fragile, unusual creature. She will not be able to be around, will not understand. Angie also felt sick, and to comfort her, her mother prepared a lot of delicious food, and these smells spread all over the northern shore. As a whole family, they sat down at the table, remembered various funny stories. Mother became a little easier when she saw the smile on Angie's face. She asked her about the church choir in which Letitia learns songs with the children. Her daughter said that she sometimes helps Letitia choose songs and hummed the motif of some song. I asked my parents what kind of song it was. However, they never heard her. Angie thought, maybe it was a dream. Everyone went to sleep. Already tomorrow is her coming of age. Will Kai be able to grant her wish, or will he? Thoughts swirled before sleep. And this melody did not leave my head. Sleep had already carried her through the blooming fields, and the melody kept sounding and sounding. Here the melody was interrupted by a voice, a silhouette on the horizon asking her again and again, but she could not speak. And he asked about the song he heard too. Then the melody began to be interrupted, and the stranger's voice sounded strange. He wanted to say something, but he couldn't. He grabbed her by the shoulder. Angie struggled to open her eyelids. The sun was already shining outside the window. What a strange dream, so real, as if everything was real, and that a stranger had dreamed. Age, I'm sure there will be a lot of presents waiting for me. Jumping up from the bed, she ran into the living room where there really were gifts. There was also a gift signed by the Blackwells. Inside was a card written by Kai. It was interesting what was inside. She opened the gift and found a layer of snow there. Kai knew how much she likes winter and snow, and in the card he asked her to wait a little for the real gift. Angie dreamed that the gift would be his face. Mother came after learning about the gift from Kai. She said about an interesting coincidence of birthdays. When her daughter gave her a curious look, she explained that the Lord's birthday was tomorrow after hers. Lord Kylek never spoke of that day, no matter how much Angie asked, and the mother explained that neither the Duke nor the Lord had ever celebrated them. Angie shared her feelings for the Lord, but her mother was quick to reassure her that the Blackwell family was not like others, and if she wanted to, she could pray. And she prayed unusually, prayed to Kai, whispering to him how she had come of age. About many gifts, but the best, his. And she also made a wish that he would get well soon, and that she would be able to see his smile. And with that, she blew with all her might and extinguished all the candles with her breath. In the morning, Angie was in the prayer room as usual and heard strange conversations, it was said, about blood transfusions, and that the medicine would be lost. She didn't hear everything and didn't understand everything, but something wasn't right in those conversations. Angie had seen this man before, but she couldn't remember. And then he returned to her, greeted her, and asked if she remembered him. He said that he was helping his Aunt Hester, who was looking after the prayer room. So one of the mysterious people she saw earlier was Hester. And I remembered my mother's stories about her older sister Hester. She died, and her son was very frail and could not leave the house. He was also said to have albinism, which is why his eyes are violet. The young man interrupted her thoughts, offering to take her home, but she hastened to refuse, since the light of the flashlights will illuminate her path and she does not need escorts. He didn't even have time to introduce himself. The night quickly covered the city and, through the open window of the house, spread over the room. Angie plunged into Morpheus's arms, covering herself with a warm blanket. As soon as she closed her eyes, she found herself in a meadow strewn with flowers, the gentle rays of the sun tickling her face, going down her hair. Suddenly she heard a shout. Someone called her and she looked around. Her eyes widened in surprise. It was the same boy she had dreamed about last time. This very wheat-colored hair was blowing in the wind. She tried to understand who it was, whether she knew him, to ask. But in her dream, she lost her voice. She felt warmth at her feet and saw fire. He covered everything around with his burning tongues. She tried to warn the stranger, but in vain. There was no voice, and the fire had already engulfed everything around. She started to run away and then heard a stranger shout, "Martin Silva!" Angie, terrified of sleep, woke up. Drops of cold sweat covered his forehead, and my head was spinning. Martin Silva, again and again. While she was regaining consciousness, a scream was heard at first far away, then closer. She thought that this is what she heard in her dream. But this one came from outside. She realized that she would not be able to fall asleep and, having dressed, took a lantern and went into the night. A scream and strange sounds came from behind the trees, and she went there. There was snow on the trees. It was cool. Not like her dream, but she had to check everything herself. Trembling at every rustle, she walked deep into the forest. When she got to where she thought the sound was coming from, she stopped and carefully turned the branches aside to see what they were hiding. Thoughts began to choose options. Who could it be? And for sure it was a wild beast. Who else could scream like that? And if not a beast, then who? However, unfolding the branches, she saw two red lights, which were either the glare of the eyes of something incredibly large or the fire of torches. A second later, the lights got closer and she saw a huge black shadow approaching. Terrified, she began to walk away and, as in a dream, could not speak. The leg turned up and she found herself on the path, convulsively searching for the lantern that had rolled away. The approaching shadow seemed familiar for a moment. Having found the lantern, she lifted it with trembling hands and saw a tall young man in blood-stained clothes. She could not remember how she knew him. When he got closer, Angie fainted. Kalik picked her up in his arms and thought that now it would be difficult to give her the gift she had dreamed of. The night was moonlit and cool. Snow began to fall in some places. Kai hugged Angie to him so she wouldn't freeze. He looked around fearfully to see if his father was approaching. But I thought that first he quenched his thirst for blood. Carrying her, so fragile, was not difficult. Lord thought all the way that this island and this terrible place is not for her. She was created for another life. And in his mind, he begged her to resist a little longer, until he was stronger, until he gained enough strength to give her protection. And he swore that he would destroy the curse imposed on their family, stop this unstoppable destructive circle. When Angie appeared in the living room in the morning, her mother was surprised that she was up so early because she had not yet woken her up. And when she asked how she got home from the forest where she was yesterday, the mother was worried and said that she was not anywhere. She was sleeping in her room. Angie told about her dream, and about the terrible scream that woke her up and about how she walked through the forest. But her mother answered in surprise that she did not hear anything. She leaned back in her chair in surprise, her heart pounding as if it wanted to escape. After all, everything was so real. The mother continued to calm her down and paid attention to the shoes, because if she had walked in the forest, they would be dirty. But they are perfectly clean. Continuing to persuade, she said that she came in at dawn and she slept sweetly as always. Angie followed her mother's logic and realized that it really couldn't be true. She must have dreamed it all, although it was all so real. And so realistically, she saw that beautiful stranger. He was so incredibly handsome that it was hard to believe in his presence. She went over in her mind what was true, what was a dream, and remembered that she really had a dream. A flower meadow. It was a dream. And this can't be a dream. There was a young man in that clearing who was calling her to look around, and he was also calling out his name, Matin Silva. She was so enthralled by the memories that she whispered the stranger's name out loud, and her mother questioned her because she didn't catch exactly what Angie had said. With a mysterious smile, answering that nothing happened, she decided to find out on her own. Who is Martin Silva and whether he exists or existed? Angie quickly finished everything, took a couple of fruits, said that she would drink tea later, and began to plan how to find out about Silva, who had dreamed. Mom saw that she was feeling better, and told me that Lord was also better and that the development of the new drug was nearing completion. The news comforted her so much that she forgot about her dream, and began to dream of meeting Kai as soon as possible. Probably her prayers helped him recover. She was ready to just hear his voice, not necessarily to see him, just to be near him, just to talk to him. Talk, 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 you can hear the clatter of hooves, day, day, day. You can hear the bells ringing in time with the clatter. The carriage rolled, swaying on the mounds. The horses stopped near the house, the driver jumped off the goat and approached the door. Angie's heart barely held in her chest. Parents came to the door. While the driver told something about the cleaning, about the sick gardeners, and about the fact that he was gathering helpers, Angie was reading a postcard that he had discreetly given. The card was about a real present for her coming of age that Kai wanted to give it today. It is impossible to convey in words what emotions the young lady was experiencing now, but she did not want to express their conspiracy, so she tried to hold back. And when the driver asked if her parents would allow her to go to the rescue, she shouted that she would love to help and would be ready very soon. Before they had time to exchange a few words, she sat in the carriage and thought that the deception was beginning to grow. Angie and Kai's mystery is growing. Kai was supposed to wait in the General Life Gardens built by the Duke for Eugenia. It was this place that was mentioned in the postcard. It was a sanctuary for the Blackwell family. She crossed the threshold and the echo of her steps spread throughout the garden. They broke the incredible silence and the rustling of the dress, which touched the flowers at the edge. With a light gait, she was heading towards the center of the Blackwell family universe. Angie saw a handsome, tall figure that was painfully familiar. When he returned, her wide eyes became even bigger with surprise. It was him she had seen in the night. It was not a dream, as she was convinced. After regaining her composure, she quietly said that she had seen him at night in the forest. He greeted, and his low voice spread sweetly through the garden. She recognized the voice, so familiar and so longed for, but it turns out that he was also in the forest? Kai said that she was not wrong, and they saw each other at night. He said that she was so terrified by something that she fainted, and he carried her home. Angie almost believed her mother that it was all a dream, because there was no sign of her leaving. And Kai said that he erased all the traces, wiped the shoes and put them on the bed so that no one would have any questions. But he was troubled by the question of why she was in the woods at night in the first place, and Angie said that she had heard terrible noises and went to find out what had happened. Kai said he heard something too, but Jerome said it was the sound of a windmill, and he decided to walk past the shore where he came across her. Windmills, amazingly, can they make such sounds? It sounded like a human scream. Kai playfully looked into her eyes and asked if she liked the gift. Angie looked into his bottomless eyes and could not believe that such beauty existed. She finally dared to ask if it was possible to come closer, to which the Lord answered in the affirmative and said that she could leave at any moment if she wanted. When she approached, she again felt the rose scent that intoxicated her every time she smelled it. Kai said that he would always respect her and her wishes. Her head spun. A blush spread across her face, her breath caught, and she was about to faint again. Their hands intertwined, and Kai hugged her to him. The thought flashed by that she was powerless not to desire him. All her dreams were only about him. The aroma of roses touched her lips, and all thoughts were silenced. Only happiness. Such a dreamy, desired kiss. Kai's arms wrapped around her fragile body, and she felt their strength. She was about to melt in his strong, strong arms. She was so overwhelmed with feelings that she almost lost consciousness. Lord asked worriedly if everything was okay. Angie looked so strange now, and happy and scared at the same time. And she said with longing in her voice that everything is wonderful, but after a little silence, she continued that they are from different worlds, that her status will not allow them to be together. Kai smiled and consoled her. She is the most precious thing in the world to him, and you shouldn't worry about such little things. There is no one in the universe more valuable than her, so let her smile immediately, her charming smile. Meanwhile, a conversation was going on in the dungeon between Duke Blackwell and Jerome, who had served his master faithfully for many years. Blackwell Sr. was exhausted. All searches for all kinds of ways to improve his health were useless or short-lived. He gave a strict order not to be there, to preserve the life and health of the Lord, and he sounded it in such a way that it was clear there could be no refusal. The Duke did not want his son to have the same participation as he did himself. He was turning into a monster. His thirst for blood was suffocating him, killing him if it was not quenched. Meanwhile, in the gardens, Kai was studying Angie, whispered to her how precious she was to him, barely restraining himself from squeezing her in his arms. She reciprocated, told how she prayed to see his face, to hug his high status and listen to his voice, how she dreamed of this moment and smelled his rose smell all around her, which every time brought back memories of the day she first heard him. But when Kai did not comfort her, she was worried about her origin. Then he told about his mother. She is the daughter of a piano teacher who taught her father. The young lady was quite surprised by such news. She did not know anything about his mother except the beautiful name, Evgenia. And thoughts flew about the improbability of similar stories, because she believed that his mother was equal in fortune to the Blackwell family. Here Kai knelt down and asked her what her heart felt. Only this is important. And Angie admitted that her heart belongs only to him. The Lord stood up, looking intently into her bottomless eyes, and hugged her with his strong arms. Her eyes said everything for her, the truth, only to him. The world is strange, and strange things happen in it. And now behind the glass of the gardens he saw her and Kailek again. They were hugging. Thoughts that this cannot be assumed made him scream, and he woke up. Terrified by the dream and its realism, He thought that this was unlikely. Why does he dream of a girl he has never seen? The question was rhetorical. He got hold of a newspaper in which it was written about the island. There was a note about the Blackwell family, but this is the lord he dreams of and that girl. Thoughts swarmed by hundreds that such a coincidence is impossible, and such dreams are incredible. And what is the young lady here for, and does she even exist? One thing stood out from this swirl of thoughts. Is it possible that this is fate? Maybe the universe is giving him a providence that is worth listening to? Meanwhile, the Lord invited Angie to break the news. The development of drugs is not going as well as hoped, so they won't be able to see each other for a while. The news saddened her, but she believed in a miracle and reassured Kai that everything would be fine and they would meet very soon. After all, she will pray every night at home and every morning in the prayer room so that he will recover as soon as possible. Meanwhile, Angie went to the library to look at the lists of everyone who had ever lived on the island. Martin Silva from her dreams still remained a mystery. Page after page, volume after volume of ancient records she read over and over again. She did not find this name in the birth registration books. But these dreams were so real they must mean something. It can't just be fiction. I started rereading again. When these registers did not yield results, she went to ask the librarian if he could point out a possible search path. But he didn't help either. In other possible registers, not only the name of Martin Silva was missing, but also a remotely similar or at least similar surname was not registered either. Flipping through all the records again, she was forced to admit that her search was in vain and that it was just a dream, albeit a rather unusual one. Memories rushed in and the thought appeared that it could be a ghost. The thought was crazy, but why not check? She had plenty of time. And she asked the librarian, maybe there are some records of those people who wanted to leave the island, like Elliot, for example. And it ended badly. He was a little shocked by such a question, but thought about it. He began to go over in his mind whether there were such cases and whether there could be such records. After much thought, he finally looked up and said he didn't remember any such incident. But you could look at the death register if you wanted. Of course she agreed. But Letitia appeared at the door, who began to scold Angie that she did not show up for the lacework and everyone was waiting. Letitia put her arms around her and led her to the exit, explaining how they waited and were looking for her. Wanted to ask about that tricky trick with a needle that she manages. I will have to postpone my fascination with the search for ghosts from dreams. I will continue my search some other time, because Letitia will not let me go. When they arrived at the appointed place and everyone was ready to get down to business, Letitia looked carefully at Ange and noticed a change. She began to spin it in a circle, asking each time what happened. She asked why she was so beautiful and whether she had a suitor. Since meetings with the Lord were a secret, Angie, of course, denied everything. But she couldn't help but remember the evening when they confessed to each other. These memories made her shudder, and Letitia burst out laughing. She must have guessed. Then Angie stopped Letitia's rant with a smile. Two more friends who were going to sew came up and moved to the room. Here Angie asked about another red-haired and talkative companion. They always gathered near the house of worship. And today, while the girls were teasing Angie about making up a redhead, Hester watched them. Hester had heard about the fifth companion who hadn't come, and about Angie's fabrications about the screams a few months ago. The girls decided that they were all figments of the imagination. Today, Hester asked the girls to go home, said that they were putting off needlework. She announced the terrible news for the inhabitants of the island, that in the morning Duke Blackwell had died. Everyone fell silent. All conversations suddenly became unimportant. People in capes began to gather at the prayer house. It was difficult to understand who was hiding under deep hoods. Meanwhile, preparations for the burial were underway in the dungeon. Lanterns or torches shone in all the dark corners. Now the light did not bother anyone here. Jerome stood over the Duke's body and contemplated his last secret wish. Quiet, slow steps were heard here. He looked around and saw the mighty master, the Lord, slowly stepping on the carpet spread across the room behind the bars. He approached his father with inaudible steps and for a long time silently looked at the shroud that covered his body. My chest tightened more and more. Dropping to his knees, he tried to pray for the peace of his soul, which was restless in this world, but he did not succeed. Every time, looking at the covered face, the thought came that he was not alive when he was alive. He existed as a ghost and did not feel life. He thought about his mother, whom he did not get to know. He saw her portraits, heard stories about her, and knew how much his father was in love with her. It was after her death that the father went crazy. In this state, he began to accept any blood transfusion, and from this curse became stronger. Kai looked at his tired body and understood that such an end was inevitable. It was only a matter of time. He thought about his fate. Will he be able to break the spell, or is this very dungeon room waiting for him? Will he become the same monster? He remembered the look of his father as the bloodlust transformed him. These eyes, burning in the dark with red lights, cannot be confused or forgotten. And on the northern coast, Angie was sitting in silence. I was thinking about the Duke. I didn't expect that he would die so quickly. I thought because of Kailika that I should be there, should support him. I remembered how Elliot's parents were grieving. Such bottomless regret is now in Kai's chest, and she can't help it. And then I thought that such grief could make him a recluse again. This thought was so unexpected that it became scary. The creak of the door opening brought her out of her thoughts. She looked around to see her mother telling her that her father had gone to help at the Blackwell house, but she came to ask Angie to help too. Preparations will last several days, and help as last time will not hurt them much. Could she refuse? Because there she can meet Kai and support him in his grief. Her mother saw her concern and decided to calm her down. She said that there was no need to worry, because now they have a new Duke. Duke Kailik Blackwell. One life is replaced by another. Everything follows the spiral of the universe. All islanders will continue to live under the patronage of the Blackwellan family from generation to generation. Angie was worried about Kai's health, whether he would be able to heal with his father leaving them so early. Mother assumed that the cure would be sought outside the island, if the latest development did not help. Angie shuddered because the waters are full of sharks and it is forbidden to leave the island. It is deadly dangerous, and she remembered what happened to Elliot. And the stories about the war on the mainland and the fact that poisonous gas still remains there remind us once again that it is dangerous. Her mother agreed, but told her something she had never told, forbidden to be said, so that no one like Elliot would dare to reach the mainland. The details were unknown to her, but there are rumors that several times a year when the moon turns crimson, sharks migrate to other waters. Then it's safe to sail away. You can sail by ships that are moored near the pier. Usually they go out not far, only to catch fish, which is abundant here. Duke Blackwell knew this, and he, 8 years ago, went under a crimson moon to the mainland in search of medicines that could not be found on the island. An incredible storm arose. The ship swayed on the waves, gusts of wind broke the masts. He lost his entire team in a storm and had to turn back. That's why he didn't tell anyone about it, so that people don't die like Elliot without knowing the moon cycle. And this is very dangerous. So the talk that the mainland is dangerous is false? Or how should she understand it? Angie now has even more open questions. But her mother hastened to restrain the development of her thoughts and said that the Duke was in despair, and nothing was known about the mainland, and added to keep quiet about it. The young lady inquired about the next lunar cycle, but her mother did not have an answer. She said that only the servants in the castle could know, and even then not for sure. The secret conversation was over, and the mother reminded her that right after the burial, Angie had to go to the castle so she could start packing. There was still time to think, and Angie used it. After all, I didn't even dream that there was a chance to leave the island. And if it is really possible? The burial took place in very cloudy weather. The sun did not come out at all. Heavy clouds covered the sky, and the rain, which poured without a back, seemed to have no end. All the servants who had been at the castle for countless years stood with their heads bowed and paid their respects to the Duke. We prayed for his soul and blessings. Angie and her mother also came to honor the Duke's memory. Angie stayed away and looked after Kai, but he never showed himself to anyone. Here she noticed a familiar silhouette. Is it him? Kai walked quietly, looking sadly into the distance. He walked past her and she called him softly. She did not immediately understand whether he heard her, but he slowed down and motioned for her not to show them. His huge black umbrella made this sign invisible to other participants in the procession. But as he got closer, Angie saw what she thought was Kai, an incredibly similar build, but it wasn't him. Very fair hair and incredibly violet-colored eyes could be seen from under the umbrella. He greeted and said that he had already seen you. Angie remembered him, but he didn't look at all like the last time they met. Now he looked so much like Kai, only the hair color was different. The stranger said he knew everything about her passion for sewing and her love for books, and about the fact that she is the kindest inhabitant of the island. Then he introduced himself and asked Angie to call him by his first name, Mikhail, and his full name, Mikhail Randall. Immediately after the burial, There were a lot of people in the castle. Everyone tried to sum up and decide what would happen next, what the young Duke Kalek would say. Jerome gave orders to the servants. There was a lot of work, and it needed to be done quickly. Angie, from so many people, became suffocated, and she decided to go out for air to come to her senses. Mikhail found her here. He wondered why she wasn't with everyone, but Angie could tell by her appearance that she was having a hard time being there, and she nodded. He decided to support Angie and stayed with her. The silence was awkward, so she started a conversation. She asked about his long-term illness. Michaela was surprised by her directness. But he replied that it was true, but he had already fully recovered and could now visit any corner of the island. But the conversation paused again. They both thought about the fact that the Duke was no longer there and he left so young. He was exhausted by a serious illness. Angie thought about Kai. How he was suffering now, he was sick, and then glancing at Michaela, she said that she hoped that his illness had passed. He looked intently into her wide-open eyes and saw her pure heart through them. After thanking him for such a wish, he tried to change the topic of conversation. Mikhail wondered if Angie would be staying at the castle. She replied that she would be here to help with things and hoped that everything would work out for her. Michaela's support that she can handle everything interested Angie. She remembered the moment she mistook him for Kai, but now she saw that they were different. She thought about the chessboard and that they are like pieces on it. Kai as a dark figure, strict, closed, and Mikhail as if light, open and shining. Mikhail invited her to take a walk in the garden and she agreed. She needed to get away from her grief. They headed for the stairs that led deep into the garden. Suddenly, Angie twisted her leg and began to fall, but Mikhail managed to catch her. He grabbed her by the thin waist and pressed her to him. Asked how she is? She thanked him for not letting her fall, and quietly slipped out of his hands. In this whirlwind, the sleeve of the dress rose above the elbow, and Mikhail noticed that she had marks on her hands like him, and wondered what those marks were. Angie looked at her hand and said that she didn't know where they were from, and he showed his. They were the same, but he had them from injections. She had never been given injections, and she could not remember that she had been injured like that somewhere. A complete mystery. Mikhail asked permission to look closer. She allowed. The young Duke was closely watching what was happening on the stairs. Thoughts were raging. The heart was out of place. Kylek learned from Jerome that Angie would be in the castle for 10 days and was overcome with emotion. But he controlled himself. Realizing that now it is necessary to master himself and come to his senses, he decided that this was a good time, and left the castle to put his thoughts in order. Thoughts about the future, about change, about Angie, their relationship, and about the fact that he has to fix everything and overcome this hateful curse, swirled. Annette, the servant in the Blackwell Castle, with whom Angie consulted all day today on business, came to say goodnight and invite her to breakfast tomorrow. Angie happily agreed during the time they spent together. They managed to make friends. Annette seemed pretty and kind, but also rather talkative. An incredible number of events, the funeral, meeting Mikhail, working on the castle, exhausted her. She lay down and looking around thought, spacious. Although she is tired and thinks about Kai all the time, he sent a note that he will try to come today. Although it was already dark outside the window, she was waiting. I couldn't think of marks. Is it injections or bites or wounds, and where are they from, and why does she not remember them? There was no answer to these questions. Angie decided to ask her mother when she would be home, and now she is tired, probably won't see Kai, decided to sleep and blew on the candle flame. I also thought that I was already feeling good, and that I wanted rose tea incredibly. With such thoughts, she fell asleep. It seemed that she did not have time to close her eyelids, as she immediately found herself in a blooming meadow, walking through soft meadows. She heard someone calling her, more and more perceptibly. Martin called her name, but she didn't say her name. He insisted and asked where she lived. It seemed quite strange, such a realistic dream. He begged that she answered, but she still could not speak and simply nodded that she heard him. Then he asked to listen to him and informed that the roses with which the island is surrounded are drugs, and she should not drink rose tea. He warned that if she obeyed him, she would be able to remember everything that happened before and who she was before she got to Cullinan. Insisted that she must remember who she really is, just not to drink rose tea. She begged him in a dream not to go, to stay, and tried to grab his hand. But it didn't work at all. And then from the touch she woke up. Was the heart trying to jump out of the chest, or was it a dream? As if someone really touched the hand. She saw a silhouette that looked a lot like Kai and asked if it was him. Kai smiled gently and asked if she had a nightmare because she was screaming. How glad she was to see him. I didn't even expect that it would be today. She absorbed Kai's silhouette with her bottomless eyes. Immeasurable happiness. He apologized for coming late and waking her up, but he had a lot to do and couldn't escape earlier. When asked by Kai if he scared her, Angie replied that she had an unreal dream, but she is very happy to see him and now it is not scary at all. She didn't tell Kylek about that haunting dream and she hasn't now. Angie worried about him. She said that she wanted to support him in a difficult time and that she sympathized with his grief. Did you ask how he feels? And Kylek remembered that scene in the garden which he witnessed, and his heart was squeezed as if in a vice. But he replied that everything is fine, and what could not be otherwise because he has her. Her concern for him helps the events experienced more easily. He hugged her tenderly and said that soon his treatment would be over, and he had a serious conversation with her. He spoke almost in a whisper and so sweetly. The tone of his voice took Angie's breath away as she closed her eyes and listened as he talked about their future. And then his lips touched hers. The sun's rays persistently made their way through the windows and jumped around the room, like cheerful bunnies, tickling the rose petals on the windowsill. They woke Angie up. She opened her eyes but was still squinting from the nagging rays. I remembered Kai's kiss. How beautifully he kisses, so tenderly that his legs sway. While she was preparing rose tea in her head, thoughts about last night that Kai wanted to discuss something were running through her head. She daydreamed. Thoughts about the successful treatment pleased her immensely, and thinking so deeply she did not notice that she spilled the tea and burned her hand. The cup slipped and fell. When the rose tea spilled over the tablecloth and then flowed down, she remembered her dream, that Martin said not to drink rose tea because of the drug. Thinking about Martin led Angie to remember that he started appearing in her dreams when she stopped drinking rose tea. When she got sick, tea with honey was the best medicine, so she didn't drink rose water during that period. It couldn't just be a coincidence, and this reality of dreams. After much thought, she decided that she would not drink rose tea, and then Annette followed her. In the first days, it seemed to her that she was deceiving everyone, and this did not give her peace. It made her feel bad. But the days went by and she got used to hiding from everyone that she did not drink rose tea. From time to time, it became strange to her that she was following the instructions from her dream. However, the belief that her memories would return convinced her to follow this path, and in her heart there was hope that she was doing the right thing. Her time at the castle was up and she was about to return to her northern shore. Everyone she met here came to wish her a safe journey. The lights of the carriage moved away. Everyone looked after her. Angie breathed another life stage here. She remembered. I remembered the red-haired, talkative girl, Lucy Perron. That was her name. I remembered that they embroidered lace together. She spoke an incredible amount. But why did everyone forget about her, and where is she? After all, Angie once told everyone about her, but the girls started laughing and insisted that it was all fiction, and why did everyone forget her? It seemed most likely that someone had erased all mention of her from all the inhabitants of the island, although it was incredible. Paradox. Is Martin right? The carriage stopped and she got out. The clatter of hooves grew more distant and quieter, and the lanterns grew smaller and finally disappeared altogether. Her mother greeted her with joy and quickly helped her with things, suggested that she rest because the road was not close after all. When she came closer, she saw her daughter's pale face. Circles under her eyes, her hair began to lose its luster. She was completely exhausted. Angie could not hold back and told her mother everything. And about strange dreams, about insisting that she leave the island, and about thoughts that there is probably life on the mainland. The mother listened to everything she told and could not believe her ears. Angie continued that it was not like a dream, and most likely it was true. She took her daughter by the shoulders and promised to take her to Dr. Johnson tomorrow. The thought of Angie being out of her mind was unbearable. Angie flatly refused because she just wanted to share her dreams. The mother said that it was all nonsense so that she would go to sleep and forget about it, and added that she forbids Angie to read her fantasy books and let her concentrate on embroidery. Mother had never spoken in such a raised tone before. The road was really tiring. Besides, Angie was exhausted from being in the castle, so she fell asleep very quickly. She no longer saw that her mother was around. There was always a decanter with water on the table by the bed. The mother wanted to continue living peacefully on the island, so she poured a lot of sleeping pills into the decanter. She wanted it to be like this forever and for Angie to submit to her fate, and that was the key to their happily ever after. The full moon hung over the castle. It was unusually large today and lit up the entire island. There was no place to hide. Jerome asked Kylek to stand up. Duke tried it, said he felt better than usual. There was not much faith in the new development of drugs, but it seems that they still worked. He was really better, just a little dizzy. No one was sure they would help. Kylek was better now, but no one knew when another bout of insanity might strike. He immediately thought of Angie, that he wanted to break the news to her very soon. Invite her to the castle. Meanwhile, while Angie was fast asleep, her parents turned to Miss Louise and told them all that was happening. And about dreams, and about refusing rose tea. They were worried about the young lady, her future. Could this be true? Maybe the young man from her dreams is a fugitive from the island. But this is all speculation. Miss Dunst categorically denied this. It was impossible to leave the island, and they were watching over it. If someone is lost, he did not survive in the sea. She asked if the only reason Angie didn't drink rose tea was really illness, and her parents confirmed. Miss Louise gave them more sleeping pills to add, and Angie would stop dreaming. And the rose tea would help her forget everything and make it all go away. The parents thanked for the help, but the anxiety in their eyes about their daughter, about the life that was before, still shone. The question is, has she been excluded from the list of drugs? This question surprised Louise, and she wondered if they really considered her a daughter. All the secrets were tightly hidden, but slowly opened up. The mother, bowing her head, said that she really became very close to her. She had never met such an incredible, sunny person. Miss Dunst reassured them. Hergot's wishes that not a single hair would fall from her head, and she promised to reset her memory if it happens again. The bustle of the city, its multitude, could not surprise anyone here. With dawn, with the first rays of the sun, noise and commotion began here. Wilhelm van Armitage is the founder of the Armitage Steel Company. I was sitting in the big living room when I heard Martin come. Martin came with his daughter, said hello, smiled, and said he was glad to see Mr. Wilhelm again. He told Armitage about his plans to go to Cullinan Island. And a small boat will be able to get there, but he needs a merchant ship. He told about his old memories, how he was kidnapped as a child and taken to that island. Mr. Wilhelm was worried, not about the ship, but about Martin. Silva hastened to reassure him that if he did not disembark, he would be in no danger. This was not their first conversation, so Wilhelm had already thought about it and asked if Martin believed he could find the girl of his dreams. Of course he couldn't be sure, but he wanted to try. Maybe he can stop this kidnapping of children from the mainland. How he was kidnapped once. He reminded Mr. William that he had also saved his daughter from being kidnapped. But orphans who are not wanted were usually abducted. Armitage did not like these words and shouted at Martin that he accused the Blackwell family of kidnappings and drugging. After all, this is an ancient family. The Blackwells are the second line of the native kingdom. Their family is the most powerful on the continent, and they have no need for such actions. They can hire anyone. Wilhelm lowered his voice and said that he owed his daughter's salvation. But Martin should forget these absurd ideas, and he would reward him generously. Martin said in a low voice that this is how they operate. They kidnap orphans for sacrifice, and his daughter, when she was lost, was dirty and wet, like an orphan. And instead of a reward, Matron asked to protect all the orphans so that they could not be kidnapped to that terrible island. Armitage calmly tried to inquire why it was Blackwell. Because they can buy absolutely anything. Martin told about eternal life and its curse. That in the past years the Blackwell house performed forbidden rituals, and for this they need the flesh and blood of children. This allows them to gain immortality. A sunny, flowery morning spread over the island. Angie left her favorite marigolds as the artist's signature this time as well. She prepared gifts for the inhabitants of the castle, with whom she managed to make friends while she was a guest there. She made one of them for Mikhail. He was so shocked that he could not recover. And then he noticed that his name is spelled differently. But there is no need to change it. He likes it very much. Angie thought that it was unusual. She smiled. She remembered how her mother insisted that she could only sew. No reading. Since then, she has been embroidering all the time. It turned out to be an interesting fact that those dreams stopped. Martin did not appear again. This led to thinking, but what was happening was not clear. And she finally made up her mind that she would no longer drink rose tea, because she wanted to understand and remember everything, and that might help. And in the Duke's castle, Preparations were being made for the inheritance ceremony. Miss Dunst, too, in her own way, was preparing. Since the treatment was completed, we decided not to postpone this event. For this, it is necessary to get an audience with Her Majesty on the mainland. Hearing that the Duke was going to the mainland, Hester was worried about Mikhail, but Louise reassured her and said that now it was necessary to find new medicine. She continued to muse aloud that Kai was going to flat out refuse to take Angie's blood, and she was a perfect match, so we had to focus. And he and Hester began to select new medicines for the Duke from the new catalog of apprentices that had arrived from the mainland. A cool night descended on the island. The fire in the fireplace of Angie's house licked the black, and the wood, wet in some places, screamed from the heat and flames. At the table there were whispers of conversation, thoughts about drugging Angie. Mother didn't want to do it, but Father was sure that it was worth going ahead. The mother whispered that she often noticed. Kai treats Angie unusually, gives gifts. He never did this for other companions. Reminded me of Angie's last gift with embroidery. She assured her father that it was something more than friendship, and he replied that he did not want her memory to be erased. Angie, I didn't drink the water by the bed today. I heard the whole conversation and was amazed. She thought that sound sleep was a side effect, because she does not drink tea. She always drank a cup of water before going to sleep and fell asleep. The dreams were empty, nothing was dreamed at all. And it's all because of drugs in the water. When they brought the gift from Kai, there was a card for her to come in this dress that evening. Therefore, she did not drink water, but pretended to be asleep. After waiting for everyone to fall asleep, she ran. On the way, thousands of thoughts ran through my head. What kind of drug? Why? Because of a dream with Martin, or because of a relationship? And she had no answer to any question. And the questions grew and increased in number like mushrooms after the rain. She ran to the edge of the forest where Jerome was waiting for her. He was surprised that she was running because there was plenty of time. He offered to rest, but she refused. She wanted to be in Kai's strong arms as soon as possible, and forget everything that bothered her and what she had heard about. And as soon as she touched him, all worries were forgotten. She was so pleased that he had healed that he looked much better now. Kai admired her dress, how radiant she is in it. And she was still babbling about whispering around that everyone would know about these meetings. To which she received the answer that she deserves both his attention and his gifts and even much more. Tenderly embracing her and holding her close, he quietly asked her to do him the honor of holding her in his arms today. Angie said nothing. Only a hot breath escaped her lips. These sweet words, these sweet lips of his, the smell of roses made my head dizzy. Kai said she could stop him at any second, but she could not. She wanted to quell the heat that was rolling through her body. This flame so engulfed her that only the warmth of his body could quench this thirst. She did not think about all the questions that worried her now. It flashed through Kai's mind that he had been waiting for this for an incredibly long time. I did everything possible to restrain myself and not to frighten her. There was more than one such night. Many nights filled with madness of desires. The fire that burned in their hearts and bodies cannot be extinguished. An insatiable thirst enveloped. They got to know each other again and again, and it grew into something bigger, grander than just admiration. Once, quite full, they went out for a walk under the night sky. The air was incredibly clean. It was so easy to breathe that the recent fatigue was gone. Kai wanted to show her the place where he liked to be alone. There were an incredible number of fireflies, so they sparkled. It is impossible not to look. Angie really liked it, and Kai said it was his father and mother's place, and that she was the first to whom he showed it. She was very touched. She was silent. He talked about how he watched her from here when she was at home, how he admired her radiant appearance and how much he had to tell now. In his plans for the moment was the succession ceremony, which will take place on the mainland, and he wants to stay there, live there, and offered to go with him. There are no words to describe Angie's surprise. After all, there is poisonous gas and you cannot leave the island. Everything got mixed up and she didn't understand. Maybe it was a joke. The answer she heard made her freeze. Kai said that this is all false and that life is raging there and countless people live there. He said that they could live there and he would gradually tell her everything he wanted to say, if only she were always around. And added that after everything he said, he hopes that she will stay with him forever. The sea was restless. The waves rolling onto the sandy beach foamed and crawled back into the depths. There was a splash as if something was falling into the water. Then stout men from the merchant ship jumped out of the boat that swam to the shore. They breathed a sigh of relief that they had reached the island. It was not so easy to bypass the windmills that surrounded him. News travels fast, especially on the island. In the morning, all residents already knew that a merchant ship had arrived during the night in a storm. And the captain of the ship met with the young duke. The captain said that the island was surrounded by a thick fog. Probably because of this, it remained safe. And the news that the mainland was now crowded but still needed to be careful also flew around the island in an instant. Angie listened to all the news in silence, only thinking that it was incredible that now there was an opportunity to see an even bigger world. She was mesmerized by the coincidence of what Kai had told her the day before about the mainland and this ship. An incredible coincidence. The thought of Martin came again, because now it turns out there is a possibility that he exists, because there is life. And everything he said could be true. And what he said about rose tea might be true too. Angie put together all the puzzles that used to be torn pieces, now they fit together. She understood that she still didn't know much, but she wanted to find out in order to help Kai recover. She was so worried about him. Angie heard a dull cough, turned around. Letitia was sitting next to her. She was very pale and exhausted. After inquiring about her health, Angie heard her friend's soft voice. Letitia asked if Angie had ever met Kylek.